The story of South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem just keeps getting more interesting, but also sort of painful to watch. And we talked about in a past segment her appearances on some mainstream media outlets. Now I have for you her getting confronted by a right-wing host who normally would be very loyal to someone like Kristi Noem, and it was even worse watching her try to wiggle out of that one. So what is this in reference to? Well, as we talked about, she is experiencing some political trouble. She was who I thought initially was the leading contender to be Trump's vice presidential running mate. That has absolutely dissolved those chances as she continues to struggle to defend things that she included in this upcoming book. And in it, she talked about killing her dog Cricket. That was the first wave of political fallout. Then she also included a fake, false, phony story about her meeting Kim Jong-un. And whenever she gets asked about including that false story, she makes clear she's taking it out, but she refuses to just say it's an inaccurate story. And it's bonkers watching her do this routine on one show after another. And it just keeps getting worse now that she's done it so many times. So before I play you this latest example of her being confronted about telling this fake story in her book, and she read the audiobook, so she definitely read over this part and decided to keep it in, so you can't make it was the ghostwriter's fault argument. And before getting to the right-wing host confronting her, here's just some context for you in case you missed this saga. And my colleague Cole put together this just to help us understand of how repetitive her talking points are on this subject.
Quote, "I remember when I met with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, I'm sure he underestimated me, having no clue about my experience staring down little tyrants. I've been a children's pastor after all." Did you meet Kim Jong-un?
Well, as soon as this was brought to my attention, I certainly made some changes and looked at this passage. And I've met with many world leaders. I've traveled around the world.
I'm not going to. I don't talk about my conversations with world leaders.
Kim Jong-un. Did you meet him?
I've been to the DMZ. I've been to North Korea.
You went to North Korea?
You went to the DMZ, and there are details. There are details in this book that talk about going to the DMZ.
Just as soon as it became to my attention, I asked for the content to be changed, and it has been. I asked to have adjusted and have the content and that name removed.
And as soon as it was brought to my attention, I asked for it to be changed.
Yes, when I became aware of that, we changed the content, and the future editions will be adjusted. When I looked at the book and I saw that excerpt, I decided to make the change to the content of the book, and that's been done. I've been involved in policy for 30 years.
So maybe you did have a conversation with Kim, but you don't want to talk.
I will not talk about my personal conversations with anyone.
You get the point. So she's very on script, as I said previously. She's locked in. She's been in policy for 30 years. Oh, so did you go to North Korea and meet Kim Jong-un, or did you not? I was made aware of that section, and I'm removing it. Okay, so you didn't. I have been. You've been to North Korea. I've been to the DMZ. Not to be confused with the DMV. Okay, DMZ would be the demilitarized zone right in between South Korea and North Korea. And she responds with that. And I've met with lots of world leaders, and I've had lots of conversations that I'm not going to talk about. And I refuse to tell stories from these meetings, except for all the stories that I still have in this book about those meetings. Makes no sense. She talks about meetings with Boris Johnson and being at events with Benjamin Netanyahu. She tells a story about canceling a meeting with Emmanuel Macron, and Macron's office denies that ever happened. So it's just a lie that the reason she's taking this out is because she accidentally included a story and she didn't want to include any stories with world leaders because she is keeping some in there. It's because it's a lie, but she won't admit that. And here we go again on Newsmax.
I agree with you there. But going back to what you said a moment ago, maybe not lying to the American people. And I think this is important to talk about because the book's called No Going Back, The Truth on What's Wrong with Politics. And I think part of the problem with politics today is that politicians aren't honest with the American people. So if you asked me a month ago, who's at the top of the list to run with Donald Trump, I would have said your name. If you asked me that same question this morning, I don't even think you're on the list.
Really?
So my question for you, yes, really, and it's because of things that have come out in this book, like your claims that you met Kim Jong-un And then over the last week,
I've been to the DMZ. I've been to that area. What I've said
is that... Did you stare down Kim Jong-un?
Let
me, Governor, 1 second. I will give you an opportunity to respond. I just want to get this out there. So here's the quote from the book. You say that, I remember when I met North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, I'm sure he underestimated me, having no clue about my experience staring down little tyrants. Governor, that never happened, did it?
What I have said in the book is that when I became aware of the content, that we had it changed.
After watching that compilation, it's really trippy to hear her say that again. Do you have any other way to phrase your response, Kristi Noem? This is disastrous. And by the way, imagine in any other facet of your life if you did this. The example I used yesterday was, and I'll play more from this, if you got confronted about not doing the dishes by a family member, spouse, roommate, whoever, and your response was, I wiped the countertops. What are you talking about? No, I know, but I asked you to do the dishes. Did you do the dishes? Oh, so you're admitting you didn't do the dishes, but you did the countertops. No, I did do the countertops. Oh, it's so bizarre. Here, I'll go back a little bit.
I'm sure he underestimated me, having no clue about my experience staring down little tyrants. Governor, that never happened, did it?
What I have said in the book is that when I became aware of the content, that we had it changed. And that's the way that it is. So I should not have put that anecdote in the book. I'm not going to talk about my meetings.
But an anecdote indicates that it happened, right?
I'm not going to talk about my conversations with world leaders. I've been involved in policy for 30 years. For 30 years, I've been traveling the world, talking to world leaders. And that is a conversation that I'm not going to have in this book. So I've answered that in interviews already. I've been very forthright. And I think that a typical politician wouldn't.
The gaslighting. I know that term's overused, but I've been very forthright. I've been very honest. And how dare you accuse me of being dishonest? You're the one being dishonest. If you haven't, I'm sorry if you didn't process the genius of what I just explained to you, but I've been very forthright, okay?
Couldn't be that honest. As soon as it became to my attention, I asked for the content to be changed, and it has been.
Governor, I'm not asking you about the details of this alleged meeting. I'm asking if the meeting actually happened. I don't think it did. And I think if it did, you'd be able to confirm for me that, yes, it did. And here's when it happened. It happened, say, at such and such a date or a month, or you don't have to be specific.
I'm not going to talk about my conversations.
You're going to
with
continue
leaders.
to have to answer this question then.
I don't think so, because the average American citizen is more worried about the border. They're more worried about what we see in a White House and a president.
When all you have is a hammer, everything looks like nails. And that's what we're seeing. The border, you're going to bring up the border. Kristi. The border. This has nothing to do with the border, except for the border of North Korea, okay? And looking at the border of North Korea from the DMZ is not the same as meeting with Kim Jong-un within North Korea. And also, the usage of the term anecdote. This host, Flannery or something, the Newsmax host, he's as dishonest as it gets. You look at his normal coverage, super dishonest, super MAGA, crazy stuff. But here he makes a good point. Using the term anecdote makes it sound like you're saying it happened, because you're saying I shouldn't have included that anecdote. But the issue is there's zero evidence, zilch, of I'm having too much fun with this, of you having such a meeting. So it's not an anecdote that you shouldn't have included for privacy reasons. It's a lie. It's something you made up because you thought that we weren't going to focus too much on it. We'd think, yeah, I bet she met with Kim Jong-un at some point, but people fact checked it. So now you're in trouble. And instead of being honest and saying, listen, I was trying to make myself seem cooler than I am, and I apologize for that. But let me tell you about my actual experience. And as we heard so many times, it's 30 years of experience in policy. And that could have been a response. I think there wouldn't have been as much political fallout. But as the Newsmax host said, the more that you give these weird political dishonest answers, the more you're going to get asked about it. And the more it'll continue to be a story, and the more you're getting ruled out as Trump's VP pick, which is funny given that Trump is as dishonest, if not more, than Kristi Noem. But that will cause him to be concerned with her as a political liability. So there it is, not helping herself out much as she continues to wade through the political nightmare that has been caused by her own book. Very, very strange. Let me know what you thought of all that in the comments.